Yeah, so let's go over the new price types here that are available in the solvers. So this feature was added, these new prices essentially was added just to make it a little more convenient to use price data. All right, when I say price data, I mean, like the open, high, low, and close of a bar. Those prices. Previously, we had an indicator called chameleon, and chameleon's function was to expose all the price data to BloodHound. Let's see, there we go. Yeah. So chameleon, right? You can see it has all of these prices here, and so that's why it was built, so that you could get any of these prices into BloodHound. Right. So this indicator was nothing fancy, but now we, in preparation for Falcon, we now have these prices available in BloodHound, in the framework of BloodHound. So, all right. So, what I'm going to do is I'll do a simple demonstration here of how there's some additional settings in these price types, and what I'm going to do is we'll compare the price of the bars to the Bollinger Bands. I'm going to use this to help demonstrate what some of this extra functionality does for the prices. So I'm going to grab a comparison solver, and we'll compare each of the price types to the Bollinger Bands to take a look at how that works. Alright, so let me give this a name. So it's going to be the price to the Bollinger. Alright, so I'm going to change the type, right? So the type parameter, I'm going to change that to price. And so now we can see that we have two pieces of price data here exposed to us. And of course under that, right, we have the open, high, low, close, median, typical, and weighted. Now you see that there's two closing prices here. One is for evaluating the long output, and one is for evaluating the short output. And then we have this look back period. So if you just want to look at the price, the closing price of the current bar, then you're just going to use the default setting of 1. So a look back period of 1 just means the current bar. So it means that you're not looking back. So a look back period, I guess let me go a little beyond this. The look back period starts at 1, has a starting value of 1, whereas a displacement has a starting value of 0. I guess it was, just as a little side note, I think it was done this way because a look back, I guess the programmers kind of decided to do it this way. So this is NinjaTrader's format, and so we decided to stick with NinjaTrader's format. So NinjaTrader starts its displacement at 0, but indicators that have a look back function built in, NinjaTrader starts the numbering at 1. So just a little note about the difference between these two things. And they can do the same thing. They can be used to do the same thing. However, a look back has more functionality, and that's really what I'm gonna explain to you in this lesson here, right? So I think it's pretty simple to understand, about just using the prices here. So a simple use of using these prices is, all right, so for the longs, let's say I'm going to try and build like a mean reversion system, or like basically a reversal system, and I want to know whenever the low price breaks below the lower Bollinger Band, right, telling me that essentially price is overextended and it might be a little pullback, a little retracement back. Right, and the opposite for when the high of the bar breaks above the Bollinger Band. I'm going to use that to identify short, potential short possibilities, right? So for a long signal, I want to use the low of the bar. All right, so we're looking at the low of the bar to see when it breaks below the lower Bollinger Band, and we're going to use the high of the bar to generate a short signal. So when the high of the bar extends too high, we want to identify this as a short. We want to get a short output to identify a short potential. All right, so next thing, I'll just go in here and set up the Bollinger Band. And yeah, on my chart, the Bollinger on the chart is a 2 standard deviation 14 period, and so I'm using the lower band to generate long signals, and I'm using the upper band to generate short signals. Okay, and let's see, let's start working on the logic board here. Alright, we'll drop that solver on there. Okay, there we go. So, alright, and it looks like I need to hit F5 on my chart, and I need to save my template. So let me give this a name here. Seems like February came pretty quick. Alright, so let's take a look at the outputs here. Alright, so the outputs here look a little confusing because I'm kind of using this in a backwards. Well, okay, how about, let me just kind of go with something standard so it's a little visually easier to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my mind and I'm going to reverse the prices here. And I also need to flip that. There we go. Okay, so now, yeah, this is a little visually easier to understand here. So when the low price breaks below the band, we can see we get a short output, and then when the high prices break above the band, we're getting a long output here. Okay, so just to go through this again, right? So for a long output, I'm using the high price. So we can see over here, right? Whenever the highs break above the band, we're getting these a long output. And we can see whenever the lows break below the band, we're getting a short output here. And you'll notice that I quickly went in here and reversed my long and short settings here for the indicator. All right, so now I'm using the upper band to generate long signals. Right, so when the high is above the upper band, I'm generating high signals. And when the low price is below the lower band, I'm generating short prices here. So this is just a very simple use of this. Let's see. I'm trying to think of another example here. Well, let's see if this ever happens. So let's just say I want to know if the median of the bar breaks below, and yeah, wow. So on this bar here, yeah, it looks like almost the whole bar is below the band. So definitely the median, which is essentially the average of all 4 price points of the bar, is below the band there. So that tells us that we're pretty much, that's usually an indication that price is really overextended there. And then let's see if the high of that bar broke below the band. So the high of the bar didn't quite break below the band. And let's see if it does somewhere else on the chart here. No, it doesn't look like it. Here, let me adjust my indicator here. So how about if we do like a 1.5 standard deviation? And there we go. So now we got some places where even the high of the bar broke below it. But I do need to adjust the indicator on the chart so that we can visually see that. There we go. Yep. So now we were able to identify when the whole bar, right? So if the high of the bar is below the band, that tells us that the whole bar is below the band there. Right? A couple of places like that. All right, and let's we can do the same for the long side. So if we want to identify if the whole bar broke above the band, the upper band, then what we can do is we can change our price type long. So if we want a long signal when the whole bar breaks above the upper band, we'll take a look at the low price. And there we go. We can see the low, the bottom of the bar, is above the upper band. All right. Okay, so now let's take a look at the look back period. So how about I'll do something simple like 3. All right. So the default setting is just this single value here. All right. So let's pay attention to this bar here. So when we set a look back period of 3, what we are literally doing is like the name implies, we are looking back. So from this bar, oops, grab that arrow. So from this bar, we're looking back. We're actually looking back to this bar here. So we're actually looking to the high of this third bar back here, right? And so this third bar back is not below the lower band. Let's step forward to the next bar, right? So we can see that on this bar is actually looking back to the third bar back, like so. And right, like so on and so forth. And let's see, if I'm counting right here. Okay, there we go. I just had my counting off a little bit. So let me adjust my arrows. Okay, there we go. Now the arrows are correct. So from this bar, it's going to be looking back to here. Right. So the single value just grabs the single value, the value of of the bar of the look back period. So if we're looking back 3. Right, it's just going to grab the bar of that third bar back. So, Alright, so let's see. Some of these other options here, right, is average, minimum, and max. So average is so these other, okay, so I guess let me step back. So the single value is just going to look at the price of a single bar. So it's just looking at the price of, you know, oh, let me grab that diamond, there we go. So it's just looking at the price of just a single bar here. So with this being the current bar, it's just looking at the price of this single bar. Now these other options here, these bottom three options, the average, min, and max, these are actually looking at a period, so, or a range. Think of it as a range. So if we're using average, it's actually looking at an average of the last three bars. So now, and the average that it's looking at, think of it as an SMA. So if I applied an SMA on here, so let's go put an SMA, and I need to set my SMA to 3 because my look back period is 3. Right? And I also need to change the input series to high. Right? So we're feeding the high price into the SMA, and that essentially is what this average value is doing. So if I hit OK, so there's our SMA, and let me change the color on here actually. So it looks a little different from the Bollinger Bands. Alright, so this average, so if we have the look back period set to 3 and our short look back processing is set to average, so this average values essentially is created an SMA 3 period, and it's averaging the high prices. So now we can visually see on the chart, you know, the data that's being fed to our comparison solver. So now, if we scroll back through the chart, you know, I really doubt the SMA 3 of the high prices ever gets below the Bollinger Bands, but let's just take a look here. No, it never does. And, of course, in that case, we never get a short output either. So, okay, I'm just going to scroll back through the chart really quickly, see if I can identify any such condition. Almost got it there. Didn't quite get below. Alright, well, I created a situation where that just never happens. Alright. Okay, so here's the area I was working in. So let's look at the long output. Yeah, here we go. So if I use the average values for the long side here, change that to the long side, and since the SMA I have on here is set to the high price, I will change my long type to the high price. Right, so for the long output and the long look back processing, I'm using the average as well. So now whenever this SMA set to the high price, whenever it breaks above the upper Bollinger Band, alright, we're going to get an output now. So right there's the value of the SMA, and of course our bar never broke above. Our bar is completely inside the bands, right? But the way we have our price data set up, since it's averaging, right, the average of the high prices is still above the upper band, and that's why we're getting a long signal on this one bar here. All right, so let's move on to the next. So the minimum value here. So if we're taking a look at the minimum value, hold on, I'm going to set this back to low. All right, so the minimum value is going to look back. It's going to look back through our range here, and it's going to find the lowest value within this range, right? So that's why this look back is actually called a period, because it's basically creating a range or a period, a period to look back through, right? So so the average, the min and the max values are looking back through the number of bars that are included in this range. So we can see, let's take a look here. Let me erase some of these arrows here, clean this up. So this, my rectangle here is I'm trying to demonstrate, our 3-period look back range, right? So as we we have a look back period 3, and what we're looking for is the minimum value within that look back period. So it looks like something's slightly off here. Interesting. Yeah. So there's definitely something slightly off. Yeah. Oh well. Geez, guys. Sorry about this, but it looks like we're going to push out another update here. So, if this is how it should be working. So, right, my little rectangle is kind of identifying the range here. And so, this is going to be, oh, no, I'm sorry, that's right. Let's see here. I'm looking at the high price, no wonder. Yeah, I'm looking at high price. So remember, I'm using the high price here, so sorry about that. I kind of caught myself off guard. So back to this example here. Well, actually, let's go back to this bar. Okay. So we're looking at the high prices, and we're looking for the minimum value of the high prices within that three look back period. Right? So if this is the current bar, oops. So my red arrow is on the current bar, so I can see where my diamond is. This identifies the minimum price of the 3 lookbacks. Right, so if I look at the highs of these 3 bars, this is the minimum value of those 3 highs of those 3 bars. And since this high is not below the band, there's no output, not yet. So we stepped over to the next bar, and so now as we look back, right, we can see, so now this is the lowest bar. So this is the lowest high of the 3 bars that we're looking back within our 3-period look back range. And as we step forward again, so here's the highs that we're looking at. So this is still the current bar, but our low is this bar. So in our look back period, we do have a high that's still below the lower band. We'll step forward another bar, and so right, this bar is still included in our look back period. And now when we step forward, here we go, now this is the low within our look back period. And so now yeah, and so now on the current bar here, right, we can see there is no long output anymore, since the lowest high is inside the bands there. Right, so that's how the minimum function is going to look. So let me use the long output side, the long side, to demonstrate the max value here. I guess quickly I'll just show you on the short side here. So if I set this to max, we're not going to get any shorts in here because in our look back period, if we're finding the max high, there's always a high that's inside the bands. Right, so there was only 1 bar that was below. So if you use the max on the short side here, you would have to have 3 bars that had their high price below the low in order to get a signal. So, and I don't think that happens anywhere. So instead, I'm going to use the long side to demonstrate this. So let's go find an area. Here we go. Okay, so for the long side, we're using the low price. So we're looking for the maximum value of the low prices with our look back of 3. So here, I'll stretch this out a little bit more. Right, so this is the maximum low price within our 3 look back period here. So if we step forward 1 more, so now the highest low, so in other words, if we're looking for the maximum value of our lows, we're looking for the highest low value. And we can see it's up here on this bar. And that dot's awful big. So let's change it. Let's change it to this arrow. There we go. So we step forward another bar. Right, so this little doji here still has the highest low value. and it is still above our bands. So that's why we get a long signal, because the highest low is still above our bands. And let me delete those. Alright, so in our look back period, this doji is still included, and so the highest low out of all three of these bars is still above the upper band. And if we step forward one more, so now, let's see, it looks like, yeah, I think that is our highest low, which is below the band. It's right, it's below that band, so there's no output on this bar. Alright, so basically that covers it. You know, really the only thing to kind of learn is just what these four, you know, processing things do here. So, right, I think understanding what, you know, what price you want to use is pretty straightforward. So, yeah, so Ken was commenting, I thought this was reversals. And yeah, originally I did set it up as reversals, but I wanted to give an easier, you know, as I said, I wanted to give an easier visual understanding. You know, this is really was about, you know, about understanding what these do. And so I changed, you know, I changed it so that it's visually easier to understand there. So I really wasn't doing this to build a system or anything. It's really, the example I came up with is just to so you could visually understand how these four functions work here. Okay. Let's see. Alright, so John has something related here. If you want to explain how to check for bar straddling the Bollinger Band, I'm thinking two separate comparison solvers ANDed together. That would be correct, John. Yes. Alright, so since we're on this topic here, alright, so John is wanting to identify, you know, a bar that straddles the Bollinger Bands here. So that would be something like that bar. Right, so straddling would be where the high of the bar is above the band, the low of the bar would be inside the band. And the opposite would be true for something like this here. So, like this bar would be straddling, and this bar would be straddling. So yes, that would require two solvers, because you're having to look at the low of the bar and compare the low of the bar to the band, and you also have to look at the high of the bar and compare the high of the bar to the band to make sure that the high of the bar is inside the band. So let's yeah, let me build that real quick. Actually, I will just create a new logic template here, right? Okay, so I'm just going to use a new comparison solver here. So the first comparison solver, I'll have it check for the high of the bar and compare it to the bands. So we'll set this to price, and all right, let's see. Yeah, I'll set this up as a reversal signal because, yeah, with a bar straddling, it'll be visually it'll be easier to comprehend. So I'll make this a reversal signal here. Alright, so we want the high of the bar. So for a long signal, right, so on this bar here, I'm going to generate a long signal. So I want to check the high of the bar for a long signal. I'm just going to check a single value, just the value of that bar. And in indicator B, I'm going to set that up for our Bollinger bands. So I'm going to use the lower band to generate a long signal for a reversal signal. The upper band will generate short signals. And let's change our standard deviation here. Alright, so now let me set up the short signal here. So if I scroll down, alright, so here's our bar. Well, actually this bar here straddles as well. So let's get both of these bars on here. Alright, so we're looking at the low of this bar is, it's going to be below our band. So for a short signal, we're going to analyze the low price. And there we go. So yeah, we can see that there is a, so if we take a look at this bar and look straight down, we can see there's a short output here. So that means this condition's met. And this is really nice and convenient. So this bar over here, we can see the low is above the band, so this bar is no longer straddling, and we can see that that short output's gone. So that helps us identify that, right, so that our solver is built correctly. All right, so now we need one more solver. Let's grab another comparison solver. Alright, set up the prices here. Okay, so let's work on the lower band first. So let me just double check. Yeah, okay. So the other solver here, it was looking at the high price, you're right, for this bar that's straddling the lower band. So this solver is going to be looking at the low price to make sure that the low price is below. Right, so let's set our price to low. And next let's set up our Bollinger band. Alright, we're using the lower band to generate long signals, upper band to generate short signals. And there we go. So now we just need to work on the short signal here. And so the short signal, right, so the first solver we made, it looked at the low price, so the second solver needs to identify the high price. So let's change this to the high price, like so. Alright, that looks correct, and so now we need to AND both of these together. And oh, okay. Let's see here. Yeah, okay, I will need to rearrange these. That did not come out as expected. I was thinking that the second solver was going to act as the filter for this first solver. However, you know what? To restructure these, okay, let me... So I'm going to set the first solver up to analyze the high price. And then I'm going to set the second solver up to look at the low prices here. So let's see what that does. Okay, so for a long signal, I need the high price to be above the line. So we have high price, which is A, is greater than the Bollinger Band. So that's set up correctly. And for the short signal, so for our short signal, the high price is going to be above the upper band. So for the short signals, once again, A, which is the high price, is going to be greater than the band. So I need to set this to 1 and set these to 0. There we go. That looks good. Alright, so now let's set up this other solver here. So this one's already set up to look at the low prices. So for our long output, we want our low price to be below the band. So low is going to be A. So A is actually going to be less than B. So the low is going to be less than indicator B, which is our Bollinger Band. So let's set this to 1. And we're going to set those to 0 and set that to 0. Alright, that's good. And, alright, let's take a look at the short output here. Right, so over here is where we want the short output, and our low price is going to be below the band. So let's stretch this out a little bit more. All right, so the low price, which is A, so A is going to be less than B, which is our Bollinger. So we have A less than B, so that's set up correctly. All right, let's take a look at this now. There we go. Alright, so we just had to restructure those a little bit. Alright, so now we've identified whenever the bar is straddling the bar, or straddling the bands there. So let's see, except, let's see, we've got one exception here. Let's take a look at that. So that's going to be the low price. Here, let me give these a name before I forget. Oh, here's my mistake. Alright, so I didn't set my standard deviation correctly here, so that's why. Let's set that back to 1.5 on the Bollinger Band. There we go. Yep. Always good to double check to make sure you have your indicators, indicator periods and whatnot, set to match what's on the chart. All right, there we go. So now this guy's been taken out. Okay. George is asking, so we're totally switching subjects here. So George is asking, is Raven capable of giving totally accurate backtest results if calculate on bar close equals false? So the answer to that is yes. However, you got to understand that, Raven, since you're using NinjaTrader, I guess let me preface this that, NinjaTrader does all that backtest calculations, right? So Raven is as accurate as the framework of NinjaTrader goes. Okay, so one thing to note about NinjaTrader is that you cannot backtest a system that requires calculate on bar close equals false on historical bars. NinjaTrader just doesn't have that capability. All right, so if you want them, the only way that you can backtest when your system needs calculate on bar close equals to false, and for those of you who may be new to this, so let me show you. So this is a NinjaTrader parameter here. So what we're talking about, so this is the indicators, right? So it's this calculate on bar close setting here, right? So there's true or false. So this changes the fundamental way of how NinjaTrader calculates your indicators and your strategies. All right, so if I go into strategies, right, all strategies, so if I take a look at these sample strategies that come from NinjaTrader, you can see it also has this, there we go, this calculate on bar close setting here as well. So all strategies can be have this calculate on bar close setting as well, right? So so NinjaTrader, the only way that they have to backtest a strategy when this is set to false is you have to use market replay data, right? So that's the one requirement to have that done. Okay, all right, George. So so maybe that's probably that's probably the little piece that you're not understanding about NinjaTrader there. All right. The question is, right, this person has, let me clear my board here. This person wants to know how to set up the solvers, and in this case it's going to be function nodes, so that I will use, let's see, I'll use little diamonds here. Let's say condition 1 happens here, and then we have condition 2 happens on the next bar, right? And then condition 3 happens on the next bar afterwards as well. And then that's when he wants a signal to fire off is on the 3rd bar here. I will actually use this as my example here. All right, so we got condition, actually, let me move these over here. All right. So I'm just making something up off the top of my head. So condition 1 is we have a reversal bar. So price just reverses here. Condition 2 is we have a second bar in the same direction, and then condition 3 is, once again, we have a 3rd bar in the same direction. Sorry, so just to make up 3 conditions off the top of my head. So he wants to know, how do you make sure that condition 1 essentially happened 3 bars ago, condition 2 happened 1 bar ago, and then condition 3 is on the current bar here. So So let me start a new logic template here. Alright, so condition 1 is going to be that reversal bar. So I will just use a inflection solver here. There we go. Just grab an inflection solver, and we're just going to look at the closing price to reverse on us. Alright, pretty straightforward. So yeah, so there we go. We can see we have a short signal, so that's condition 1 met right there. And so let me move my arrow. So there, our second condition is, right, we need a down bar. So I'll just use the bar direction for that. Alright, so I set the bar direction solver up, right, so that there's no signal there. And I'm just going to grab another bar direction, because our third condition is essentially we want a second bar, a second down bar. So, right, just to make something up off the top of my head. So, all right. So there's our third condition here. Okay. Now, just to illustrate, if we stick these all into an AND node, it's not going to work. Oh, let me click off there. There we go. Alright, so we can see our inflection solver. Right, we can see that there's no signal on the second and third condition bars. So we're really not going to get any signal out if we just use an AND node. What we need to do is, right, the signal from condition 1, we need to somehow move it forward to the third bar here, where the third condition is. So one way to do that is we can use this Lookback node. There's actually multiple ways to do this. I could use, you can see that the inflection solver here, it has this Lookback period. I could use that, but I don't think that answers the way the question was written. So to answer the way the question was written, I think the best way, or the simplest way, would be to use a Lookback node, and we're going to use this displacement feature here. So I'm going to set this to 3. Actually, no, that's right. Displacement starts at 0, so I think we want 2. Let's take a look. Yeah, there we go. So, if you remember, we had the short signal on this bar, and now it's been moved forward to the condition, to the bar with our third condition. So let me reorganize these guys a little bit. Alright, so this solver here is representing condition 1, and then we're using a look back here using the displacement feature to be able to displace the signals from this solver forward in time. So just to illustrate again, alright, so we took this short signal here, and with the look back we shifted it forward. So we took this short signal here and we shifted it forward onto this bar. And so for condition 2, let me rename this. We're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to take another look back node. And let me disconnect that leader. I'm going to disconnect that one. There we go. Alright, so if we took it the raw, if we look at just the solver's output, there we go. Our signal starts here. So actually we have the signal on these two bars, but we can see that the short signal starts on our second condition marked bar. And then if we take a look at the look back, well, let's set this up first. Let's set this to, let's see, 1. Actually, 1's correct. Yep. So the displacement of 1 is correct. Alright, so now if we look at this, so now we can see that there's no short signal on this bar anymore because it's been moved forward to the next bar. It's been displaced forward to the next bar. So let's take a look at our AND node now. Connect that in and connect that in. Now our third condition doesn't need a displacement because we actually want the signal on the bar of our third condition. And so there we go. Now we have a signal on that bar there. As I scroll forward, we can see there's no more signals. So right, so any possible signals going forward got filtered out because our reversal, remember our first condition is a reversal, and that reversal only got shifted forward to this one bar. So basically I was asked kind of a theoretical question, and so this would be the theoretical answer for that. You can always keep in mind that every kind of particular trade rule that you have, trade condition you have, there's multiple ways to build that into BloodHound, and sometimes using this look back node is going to be the best way to kind of accomplish something like this, but there could be other ways that might work a little better. You kind of have to take a look at your trade rule, your condition that you're building in BloodHound, and kind of look at it in the context of the whole trading condition. So, but in a general sense, using these look back nodes is a very easy, simple way to do this. Ellen's asking, so can a solver from a 4-range chart be used when building a logic on a 1-minute chart? And yes, it can. So let's see, I do have a 1-minute chart here, and let me bring up another chart. Alright, so both of these charts here are oil. Let me close BloodHound. And let me get rid of the ES and minimize that. There we go. Okay, so let's make this a 4-range chart. And let's see, let's How about, I'm just going to put something very simple on this chart. I'll just put a, we'll look for price reversals on this chart. Or, let's see. Alright, better yet, let's look for crossovers on that chart. I think that'll be a better demonstration here. Alright, so I'm going to build a crossover solver here. Essentially, looking for, what is it, our 10 period SMA to cross our 55 period EMA. So, alright, let's change our SMA to 10. Let's change our indicator B to our EMA 55. Alright, pretty straightforward. So let's build the same condition on our 1 minute chart here. And I'm going to set my crosshairs to global so that we can get our charts to line up here. Alright, so here's the area we're working in. Let me shrink up the 1 minute chart a little bit. Okay, so we have a little rectangle here identifying, essentially approximating the same locations from a range to a 1 minute chart. And there we go. So here's the key. You know, 1 minute charts don't match up exactly with the range chart, because range charts, you know, the bar isn't going to close on the exact minute, right? These bars are closing on, so like this bar is closing on 16 minutes and 50 seconds. The next one closes on at 20 seconds, and the next one closes on 48 seconds. So I'm looking at the timestamp on the 4 range chart. You know, so let's say we got one bar here, it closed on 48 seconds, and then the next bar closed on 55 seconds, so that was an 8-second bar. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that non-time based charts don't sync up with time-based charts perfectly. Right, so that's something that you'll need to be aware of, Eldon. Alright, so on our 1 minute chart, let's add a 4 range. Alright, 4 range. And, okay, come on, update here. And let's see, I'm looking for a crossover. Alright. So text isn't updating. Yeah, I think I need to rebuild my VMware. So I think I'm having problems with Windows or something. But let's see. Yeah, this will update here in a moment. Alright, so but first let me build my crossover, which is on the 4 range chart here. I'm building the same crossover system, the SMA 10 and the EMA 55 crossover. And let me make a new logic template. Alright, so now when you look under existing nodes, now you'll see that there's two different time frames, right? So the default time frame, that's the time frame of the chart that BloodHound's on, which is, so this default time frame is our 1 minute chart time frame. So that's our default. And so we now have this for range. Let's add this crossover here. So let's name this. Okay. Let's plug that in. Alright. So that's all built. Now you'll notice that BloodHound's not updating, right? So you notice that there's a little message down here that says you need to press F5, right? So the reason why we have to press F5 is NinjaTrader does not build data on the fly. That's the one thing that it won't do for us. So what we have to do is press F5, and then NinjaTrader will build our 4-range chart for us. And okay, so now let's take a look through here. Right, so look, you'll notice that one of the crossovers was found inside on the 1 minute chart, but the other crossovers weren't found, and that's because these crossovers happened intra-bar. So they happened inside of one of these 1 minute bars, right? So that so that's kind of one of the limitations that you have to deal with when you're using time-based bars and trying to synchronize them with non-time-based bars. So we're hoping that BloodHound version 2 can get around this limitation of NinjaTrader. So that's kind of the reason why, and the primary reason why we're working on BloodHound version 2. So, yeah. All right, there's question 1 for Eldon. So let me look at the other question here. All right, so Eldon's asking, could you build a support resistance solver that will only trigger when price is, okay, well, so he wants his support resistance solver to use Tailwind mode. He wants the support resistance solver to trigger when price is within 5 ticks of a moving average. All right, let's do that. And let's see. So let me add another moving average on here. So I'm going to take this one, fade it out a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's add an EMA on here. All right. How about an EMA 55? Okay, there's our EMA, and let me fade our Bollinger Band into the background as well. Oops. Alright, so let's find when price, I guess we'll just assume the closing price is within 5 ticks of our EMA. Alright, so I'm going to create a new logic template here. And alright, there we go. So we're looking for when price gets within 5 ticks to a moving average. Actually, I guess I might as well say the EMA 55. Alright, So to grab a new solver here, so I'm going to do this on the 1 minute chart. Right, so to grab a new solver on the 1 minute chart, I need to use our default time frame, as opposed to the 4 range chart. I want to work on the 1 minute chart here. Let's grab a support and resistance solver. Alright, so we're using Tailwind, and Tailwind essentially, I guess the easy way to think of that is it's looking for kind of like it's looking for price possibly bouncing off of your support resistance, right? So in order for price to bounce off of your support resistance, that means that price needs to get close to that support resistance. So Tailwind mode is telling you when price is close to your support resistance and could possibly bounce off of that. So let's see, as some examples here, right? Price got close to that EMA 55 and then bounced off of it. So Tailwind mode is going to look for when price is close to our EMA. Alright, so we want to use an indicator. So we'll set that to true, and then we'll change our indicator over to the EMA. Alright, so let's so keep in mind that the support resistance solver, it's the one solver that you'll notice it didn't automatically have my plot selected. So when I open this up, these were unchecked. So the support resistance solver acts a lot differently than the other solvers. So just make sure that you have the plot selected that you want to use, right? Also, the support resistance solver has this check all option as well. All right, so there is something slightly different. So Eldon, yeah, just double check this, make sure you have the plot selected that you want to use. All right, so just as an example, if I go to the MACD, right, the MACD has 3 plots here, and they're all unchecked. And if I wanted to check them all, right, so the support resistance solver could analyze all 3 plots. Obviously, the MACD is not a support resistance solver, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that this is the one solver where you can actually have as many plots selected as you want, and also it's the one solver where you can have nothing selected. So just keep that in mind if the support resistance solver is not giving you any kind of feedback, any kind of output. All right, so let's go back to our EMA. Okay, so just the default settings here, we can already see a couple of long outputs here telling us that price got within 1 ATR to 1/3 of an ATR. Well, essentially, price got to within like 1/3 of an ATR to actually get a signal out of it. So if price is within 1 ATR, we're not going to get a signal out, but you'll notice that we do get an output from the solver, right? So when we just get a little bit of an output from the solver, that tells us that essentially price is probably around the 1 ATR range, and when we do get a signal, that tells us that price is close to this 1/3 of an ATR range. Alright, but Eldon wants to use ticks, so let's change these over to ticks. So I'm going to change our ATR. So what I did is, I just opened this up, and we're going to change our ATRs to ticks, and then in this other one we're going to change our ATRs to ticks. There we go. Right, and just like all the solvers, all the solvers are designed to have this kind of fuzzy logic. If you remember the solver's output prior, it had that fuzzy logic output in that variable, right? So that's why you have this ideal distance and max distance, and so you can create a fuzzy logic system. But Eldon's question just wants to use a very simple 5-tick requirement. There we go. So 5-tick and 5-tick, and there we go. So we can see whenever the closing price is within 5 ticks. So, also, this isn't totally new. This was actually added a couple of updates ago, but you can now actually select the input price that you want to analyze. So you may want to look at the closing price, but also you may want to make a second support resistance solver that maybe looks at like the low price or something like that, or looks at the high price as well. Just to kind of give you multiple options. Let's see here. See if I can find an example. So, all right, yeah, here's an example. Actually, now let me find another example. Yeah, I think I found an example right there on that bar. Right, so the closing price didn't get close enough to our EMA to trigger off anything. Right, so we could have potentially missed a trade there. So with this input price, we could set this to the high price, and it might catch this here. So let's let me rename this. All right, so alright, so this solver is looking at the closing price, alright, to get within 5 ticks of our EMA. And let's grab that solver here. There we go. And change the name. There we go. So I'm going to take this solver I just made, I'm going to make a copy of it. And instead of looking at the closing price, let's take a look at the high of the bar. Alright, so I'll rename it so we know that it's looking at the high price now. Switch back over to my logic template, and I'll add that existing node on here. Okay, yeah, there we go. So now we got a couple of short signals here, and so we could have potentially gotten this this bounce signal here off of that. All right, and so if you want to use the closing price, and the high price, what we'd want to do is use an OR node and connect them together like that. And that effectively kind of builds one support resistance solver that looks at the high price and looks at the close price, right? And I'm sure you probably can imagine that you would want to do the same for the low price So yeah, here we go. So this area over here, so for long bounces up, you might want to look at the low price of the bar for long signals up, something like that. All right. Yeah, here actually another little tip. So this is the solver that's looking at the high price, and let's see if I can find an example here. Yeah, all right. So if we're looking at the high price, practically, thinking about the practicalness of this, we probably don't want to get long signals out of this. So if price is coming down for a bounce up for a long trade, generally I don't think it's that practical to use the high price of the bar, right? We're probably more interested in looking at either the closing price or the low of the bar for long bounces. So this solver, the solver that's using the high price, for practical purposes, we probably don't want a long signal out of it. So let's set our evaluate to short only, and to me that makes a little more sense in using the high price for looking for bounces, right? So yeah, there we go. So these look a little more practical sense, and so if we want to use the low price for long bounces, so let me scroll through the chart here, and of course this solver on its own, it needs some filtering. So we can see we do have some short signals here, and that's and yeah, that's because the low price broke below the EMA. That's right. So you do need some filtering. You can't just use just the raw solver by itself. All right, but as I was going to show you, oh, that's what happened. Okay, I thought that looked a little strange. Yeah, I accidentally changed that to low, so let's put it back on high. There we go. That makes more sense. All right. So let me make another solver here that looks at the low. So I'm going to copy this solver. We'll look at the low price. Right, so if we're using a low price, then most likely we're going to be using the low price to actually look for long bounces off of our moving average. Alright, so let's drop that in here. Now let's take a look at that. Okay, yeah, there we go. So we'll plug all those into the OR node. Alright, so essentially we set up 3 support resistance solvers to look at the close, the high, and the low to look for possible bounce trades, right? So we kind of covered more ground by using the high and the low prices here. All right, I think that takes care of Eldon's question. All right, so Adam's got a question about a 5-minute breakout setup. So for an example, if the high of the previous 5-minute bar is broken, go long. Okay, sure. All right, well, 1 minute, 5-minute bar, I guess doesn't really matter. The logic is going to be the same, but we'll switch this over to a 5-minute chart. Okay, so Adam, one thing you have to decide for yourself is, what do you mean broken? What does broken mean? In other words, what price are you using to consider it to be broken? So I could say, if we look at this bar, here's the high, and I can see the high of the next bar did break it, but it was a down bar. So you kind of have to, you have to, note to yourself exactly when you say break, when you say price, when you're describing stuff, you really have to be very specific. We know what we're thinking, and so we use general terms like, just we say price, but a computer can't read our mind, so you have to translate the keywords like price into the actual price. Is it the closing price? Is it the high price? Is it the low price? Right, so this is kind of one thing to keep in mind. All right, so Adam is saying the closing price. All right, so here we go. Here's an example right here. All right, so there's the high, and clearly the closing price broke above it. All right. Let's create a new logic template. All right. Oops. Trying to rename this. There we go. Let's rename that. All right. So close. All right. So the closing, break of the previous high. Let's see. I think we can just use a simple comparison solver for this. I'll explain my naming convention here in just a minute. So you'll notice I put high, and then I put DS for displacement 1, and we're comparing it to the closing price. Actually, let me rearrange that. Okay. So indicator A is going to be our closing price. Right, so we're going to be looking at our closing price of the current bar and comparing it to the high of the previous bar. Alright, so let's change our type to price, and we're using the closing price for both long and short, so we can leave those both the same. And let's see. All right. Now, all right. So we notice that our price types don't have a displacement, but I do want to use a displacement. So I still have the old method that I can use. So I can change my indicator. So instead of using the built-in prices now, I'm actually going to use Chameleon. So I'm going to use an indicator because I can displace an indicator here. So let's change our SMA over to Chameleon, and I'm going to use the high for a long signal, and I imagine we're going to use the low for a short break to the downside, to the short side. Let's do that, and then I need to displace it. So remember, when you displace something, it takes the the value and shifts it forward onto the next bar forward. And there we go. Yep. Alright, so there's a couple of closing prices breaking the high of the previous bar. And yeah, there we go. There's a short signal. Alright, so the low, extend that. So we're taking the low price and extending it forward, and we can see the closing price broke below it. Alright, so yeah, so there we had to do a little trick there, right? Just use this. So the key to this was using a displacement of 1. So we were able to take the low, and so we were able to take the low of this bar, displace it forward onto the next bar, and then we can compare the closing price to it. Alright, thanks guys, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next Friday. Alright, bye-bye.